doll, and 3 days ago you were on Mars. Go on.
Steve McQueen was not just a movie star. He was a man who dominated Hollywood without ever needing to explain himself. But away from the screen, his life was far messier, driven by conflict, jealousy, addiction, and relationships that repeatedly collapsed under pressure. After his death, rumors exploded about the secrets he hid, how he lived, and how he really died. The disturbing details that emerged after his death would leave you shocked. The rise of Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen, also known as the King of Cool, moved differently from other stars. He spoke less, watched more, and carried an edge that didn't feel rehearsed. But what the public didn't see was how much of that intensity was shaped by a childhood marked by abandonment, instability, and survival. Born Terrence Stephen McQueen. On March 24, 1930 in Beech Grove, Indiana, Steve entered the world without a stable home waiting for him. His father, William McQueen, a stunt pilot, disappeared from his life almost immediately, while his mother, Julia Ann Crawford, struggled with alcoholism and was unable to care for him consistently. As a result, Steve was passed between relatives, spending formative years with his maternal grandparents and later with his great-uncle Claude on a farm in Slater, Missouri. None of these homes lasted long enough to feel permanent. The instability followed him everywhere. His mother's repeated marriages and relapses meant frequent moves, broken routines, and long stretches without supervision. By his early teens, Steve was skipping school regularly and spending time with street gangs. He stole hubcaps, drifted into petty crime, and was arrested multiple times. This wasn't rebellion for attention. It was a young boy with no structure, testing how far he could go before someone stopped him. Eventually, someone did. Steve was sent to the Boys' Republic in Chino, California, a reform school known for strict discipline. Unlike earlier authority figures, the staff there didn't abandon him when he pushed back. The routine was firm, the expectations clear. Years later, McQueen would openly credit that institution with saving his life. It was the first place where consequences were consistent and where effort actually mattered. After leaving reform school, Steve didn't drift aimlessly. In 1947, he joined the Merchant Marine, working aboard ships and learning to follow orders, even if reluctantly. A year later, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, serving from 1947 to 1950 as a private first class. His early military record wasn't spotless. He spent 41 days in the brig for insubordination, but something shifted over time. He trained as a tank driver and later helped pull fellow Marines from a sinking ship during a training exercise. He was honorably discharged in 1950, carrying real military experience, not just a uniform. By 1952, Steve McQueen arrived in New York City with little money and no safety net. What he did have was focus. He enrolled at the neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater, studying under Sanford Meisner, whose acting philosophy demanded truth, not theatrics. McQueen also trained at HB Studio and took method acting classes, where he built his technique brick by brick. He worked stage roles, small productions, and early television appearances, learning how to hold attention without saying much. His first film appearance came with a small role in Somebody Up There Likes Me in 1956, but wider recognition followed quickly. In 1958, he starred in The Blob, a low-budget science fiction film that unexpectedly became a cult hit. The same year, television changed everything. Cast as bounty hunter Josh Randall in Wanted Dead or Alive, McQueen became a weekly presence in American homes. Hollywood took notice. In 1960, McQueen appeared as Vin Tanner in The Magnificent Seven. The role wasn't the lead, but audiences remembered him anyway. 3 years later, The Great Escape sealed his status. It captured everything McQueen represented: independence, defiance, and precision under pressure. By the early 1970s, Steve McQueen wasn't just famous, he was dominant. He became the highest-paid movie star in the world, commanding salaries no actor before him had reached. He earned an Academy Award nomination for The Sand Pebbles and received multiple Golden Globe nominations over his career. Off-screen, he raced motorcycles and cars professionally, competing in endurance events like the 12 Hours of Sebring, often under pseudonyms to avoid studio backlash. His style became inseparable from his image. Leather jackets, worn jeans, and Persol sunglasses. The look spread globally, influencing generations who never saw his films in theaters. Steve McQueen's rise was built piece by piece, often the hard way. And while the world celebrated the success, very few understood what it cost him to get there. The struggles Steve McQueen battled. By the early 1960s, Steve McQueen had reached a level of success most actors never touched. His films were hits. His name alone could open a movie worldwide. Studios trusted him with enormous budgets. From the outside, it looked like he had finally beaten the chaos he grew up in. But behind the scenes, that chaos never really left. It simply followed him into Hollywood, where it took on new forms. As McQueen's star rose, so did the tension around him. He developed a reputation for clashing with directors, producers, and even fellow actors. One of the most talked about conflicts was his long-running feud with Paul Newman, which surfaced during The Towering Inferno. Both men were major stars, and McQueen was intensely aware of screen time, camera angles, and how scenes were cut. He paid close attention to how often Newman appeared and how his own presence was framed. This wasn't about ego alone. McQueen closely guarded his image, and any perceived imbalance felt like a threat. On many sets, McQueen demanded control over how his characters were portrayed. He questioned scripts, challenged direction, and pushed for changes that favored realism. When he felt dismissed or sidelined, he didn't hesitate to slow production or walk away altogether. Several projects were delayed because of standoffs between McQueen and studio executives. Over time, this behavior earned him a reputation for being difficult, even uncooperative. What few people failed to recognize was that McQueen had never trusted authority figures easily. From childhood onward, authority had often meant instability, neglect, or punishment. Hollywood simply became the latest environment where he stayed on guard. Away from film sets, McQueen leaned heavily into risk. Speed wasn't a hobby for him, it was a constant presence in his life. He raced motorcycles and cars with the same intensity he brought to acting. The danger wasn't incidental. McQueen drove fast, rode hard, and accepted the possibility of injury as part of the experience. Friends and colleagues worried about how far he pushed himself, especially as injuries piled up. This attraction to danger extended beyond organized racing. McQueen was known for reckless driving on public roads, testing vehicles in ways that ignored safety and consequence. Speed gave him something structure never had. When he was moving fast, there was no room for memory, anxiety, or doubt. Everything narrowed to the moment. That intensity became a way of coping, even if it came with real physical risk. Despite his fame, McQueen lived a guarded and isolated life. He rarely embraced Hollywood's social world and avoided celebrity gatherings whenever possible. He preferred the company of mechanics, racers, and a small circle of trusted friends. Large crowds made him uneasy. Public appearances felt like obligations rather than celebrations. While audiences admired his cool detachment on screen, that same distance shaped his private life. He kept emotional walls high and let very few people see past them. Loneliness followed him quietly. Success didn't bring the sense of belonging many assume it does. For McQueen, fame amplified the distance between who he was and who people thought he was. He became careful with his words, selective with his time, and increasingly private. Even when surrounded by people, he often kept himself apart. Sadly, substance use became another outlet. McQueen drank heavily and used illicit substances during different periods of his life. These habits weren't hidden in Hollywood circles and often contributed to unpredictable behavior. Alcohol and illicit substances dulled the pressure, eased restlessness, and softened the edges of a life lived under constant scrutiny. But they also deepened conflicts. His work relationships suffered, and the same discipline that once saved him became harder to maintain. To make matters worse, Steve faced a constant struggle with his identity. The label, the King of Cool, followed McQueen everywhere. It sold tickets, magazines, and a lasting image. Yet he felt boxed in by it. He wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, not just admired as a symbol. He pursued roles that challenged expectations, but the public image never loosened its grip. Every interview and every appearance only reinforced the persona he felt trapped inside. The same traits that fueled his rise also made it difficult for him to find peace once he had everything he once lacked. And nowhere would those struggles surface more painfully than in his personal relationships, where love collided with control, distance, and fear of being truly known. Steve McQueen's tumultuous love life. Steve McQueen was one of the most desired men in Hollywood, but his personal life was carrying the same tension and instability that shaped his career. These patterns surfaced most clearly in his marriages, each one marked by passion at the start and turmoil not far behind. Steve McQueen met his first wife, Neely Adams, in the mid-1950s when both were still working to establish themselves in Hollywood. Adams was a Filipino-American actress and dancer with a growing career, and the connection between them formed quickly. They tied the knot in 1956, before McQueen became a global star. At the time, the marriage appeared to ground him. It gave him a sense of family he had never truly known. The couple had 2 children, Terry Leslie McQueen, born in 1959, and Chad McQueen, born in 1960, who later became an actor and race car driver. From the outside, McQueen seemed to have built the stable home he had lacked as a child. Inside the marriage, however, stability was fragile. As McQueen's fame increased, so did his need for control. He became intensely jealous and possessive, frequently monitoring Neil's movements and questioning her interactions. His insecurity did not fade with success. Instead, it grew alongside it. While demanding loyalty and transparency from his wife, McQueen engaged in repeated affairs, often with co-stars or women he met while working on film sets. These affairs were a pattern that stretched across years. Neil Adams endured long stretches of emotional volatility. McQueen's temper was unpredictable, and his mood could shift quickly. According to Adams, his possessiveness sometimes escalated into violence, further eroding trust within their marriage. Despite attempts to hold the family together, the cycle of infidelity and control continued. After 16 years, the marriage ended in divorce in 1972. Years later, Adams would speak openly about how McQueen's jealousy, affairs, and temper contributed to the collapse of their relationship. Not long after his divorce, McQueen met actress Ali MacGraw on the set of The Getaway. Their on-screen chemistry quickly spilled into real life. At the time, MacGraw was married to producer Robert Evans, and the affair attracted intense media attention. Shortly after MacGraw's divorce, she and McQueen married in 1973. This relationship began with intensity and idealism. MacGraw later described it as deeply passionate, but that passion soon turned destructive. McQueen soon insisted that she give up her acting career entirely, demanding that she stay home and center her life around him. For a woman at the height of her career, the demand was so severe. It also mirrored the same controlling behavior that had damaged his first marriage. To make matters worse, his infidelity remained a constant presence. McQueen continued to pursue other women, even as he expressed paranoia about MacGraw's loyalty. Arguments between them were frequent and explosive, often fueled by jealousy and mistrust. McQueen's need for dominance clashed with MacGraw's independence, creating a cycle of conflict that neither could escape. After 5 years, the marriage ended in 1978. In later interviews, MacGraw spoke candidly about the relationship, acknowledging its intensity while also describing how McQueen's affairs and controlling nature made it impossible to sustain. What began as a high-profile romance ended much like his first marriage, with emotional damage and unresolved conflict. In the late 1970s, McQueen met model Barbara Minty, who was significantly younger and largely removed from Hollywood's inner circles. Their relationship unfolded as McQueen's health began to decline. Unlike his previous marriages, this one took place during a period of physical vulnerability rather than professional dominance. McQueen and Minty married in January 1980, only months before his death. The marriage produced no children and was brief, shaped largely by his illness. Despite McQueen's long-standing reputation for infidelity, Minty remained devoted to him throughout this period. Friends and observers noted a softer dynamic between them, though the time they shared was limited. Across all three marriages, the pattern remained consistent. Steve McQueen sought closeness but struggled to sustain it. His jealousy, need for control, and repeated infidelity undermined the very stability he seemed to want. The public saw a confident rebel and cultural icon, but his partners lived with a man shaped by insecurity, fear of abandonment, and destructive habits that fame could not erase. And as his fame continued to grow, so did the consequences of these choices. Beyond his marriages, Steve McQueen's personal life was also marked by scandals and controversies that threatened to overshadow his legacy. Steve's scandals and controversies. Steve McQueen's public image rested on control, confidence, and an effortless calm that made everything look easy. However, off-camera, that image often collapsed under the weight of rivalry, impulsive decisions, and conflicts he seemed unable or unwilling to avoid. As his fame grew, so did the number of controversies surrounding him, many of which followed a familiar pattern. One of the earliest and most famous clashes unfolded during the filming of The Magnificent Seven. McQueen was not the lead. That distinction belonged to Yul Brynner, already an established star with top billing. From the beginning, tension simmered between them. McQueen was acutely aware of how scenes were framed and how attention moved on screen. And so, during Brynner's lines, McQueen would subtly reload his gun, adjust his hat, or shift his posture. Small movements designed to pull the viewer's eye. These actions were deliberate and repeated. Brynner noticed, and the crew noticed. The rivalry quickly became impossible to ignore, and Brynner's frustration spilled into the press. What should have been a professional collaboration instead became a power struggle, setting the tone for McQueen's reputation as someone who fought fiercely for dominance, even at the expense of working relationships. As McQueen moved deeper into adulthood, his clashes were no longer limited to film sets. In 1972, he was arrested for drunk driving in Anchorage, Alaska. The incident resulted in a brief jail stay before he was released on bail. For the public, this arrest cut sharply against the image of cool control that defined him. It exposed the recklessness behind the persona and confirmed what many insiders already knew. Steve McQueen often pushed limits without regard for consequences. The incident lingered in the media, reinforcing concerns about his behavior off-screen. Hollywood itself became another battleground. McQueen was notorious for contract disputes, particularly over billing and pay. He insisted on top placement in credits and walked away from projects if those demands were not met. He famously turned down Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Apocalypse Now, decisions that stunned the industry. These films later became classics, and McQueen's refusal to participate was seen as both bold and self-destructive. At the time, his stance sent a clear message. He would not compromise his standing, even if it meant sacrificing career-defining roles. On set, his behavior frequently tested the patience of studios and crews. McQueen had a habit of disappearing for days at a time, often indulging in racing or partying while productions sat idle. He demanded unusual contract clauses, including free motorcycles and special accommodations that went far beyond standard agreements. His insistence on performing dangerous stunts himself created ongoing tension. Producers worried about liability, insurance costs, and the possibility of injury halting entire films. McQueen brushed off those concerns, believing that risk was part of authenticity. For studios, it was another example of the unpredictability that made working with him difficult. By the late 1960s and into the 70s, McQueen's behavior took on a more paranoid edge. After the infamous murders committed by followers of Charles Manson, McQueen became convinced that his name was on a hit list. Whether the fear was grounded or not, his reaction was intense. He began carrying firearms at all times and expanded his personal security. Friends noticed a heightened level of suspicion and vigilance. This constant readiness for danger fed into his reputation as unstable and reinforced the sense that he was living under pressure of his own making. Financial troubles added another layer to the controversy. Despite being one of the highest-paid actors in the world, McQueen repeatedly clashed with the Internal Revenue Service over unpaid taxes. His lavish spending on cars, motorcycles, and properties drained resources quickly. Earnings that should have ensured long-term security were often offset by debt and legal disputes. Behind closed doors, insiders painted a very different picture from the one audiences adored. While fans saw a calm, confident rebel, colleagues often described McQueen as petty, vindictive, and deeply insecure. The polished image he projected on screen clashed sharply with reports of volatility and resentment off-screen. As these controversies accumulated, they formed a pattern that followed McQueen into the final stage of his life. The same instincts that fueled his rise, the control, defiance, and refusal to bend, now isolated him further and intensified the consequences of his choices. And as his health declined and the spotlight dimmed, Steve McQueen entered his final years carrying the weight of fame, conflict, and a tragic end that few truly understood. The tragic decline of Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen had spent most of his life outrunning authority, fear, boredom, and even himself. But by 1980, that sense of momentum was gone. What replaced it was a slow, frightening loss of control that no discipline, money, or willpower could reverse. Early that year, Steve McQueen was diagnosed with mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer that attacks the lining of the lungs and abdomen. The disease was already advanced by the time doctors identified it. Mesothelioma was not widely understood by the public then, but within the medical world, it carried a grim reputation. Survival rates were low, treatment options were limited, and cures did not exist. Doctors traced the likely cause to asbestos exposure, something McQueen had encountered years earlier without realizing the danger. During his time in the U.S. Marine Corps, asbestos was commonly used in ship insulation and military facilities. Later, as an actor and racer, McQueen spent years around asbestos-lined racing suits, brake materials, and film sets, where safety standards were far looser than they are today. The exposure did not cause immediate illness. It worked quietly, over decades, before finally surfacing. As the disease progressed, McQueen's health declined quickly. He developed a chronic cough that would not go away. Breathing became painful. Chest tightness and abdominal discomfort worsened with time. Tasks that once felt effortless left him exhausted. For a man whose identity was built on physical control and endurance, the changes were devastating. McQueen initially pursued conventional medical treatment in the United States. He underwent chemotherapy and radiation, hoping for any chance of slowing the disease. But the results were discouraging. Doctors were direct with him. The cancer was incurable. At best, treatment might buy limited time. In fact, surgery was not recommended, and long-term survival was not considered realistic. That prognosis collided head-on with McQueen's personality. He had never accepted limits easily, especially from authority figures. Faced with a terminal diagnosis, he grew restless and distrustful. Rather than accept palliative care, he began searching for alternatives that promised something more than time management. This search led him to Mexico, where he placed his hopes in Dr. William Kelly, a controversial figure who promoted unconventional cancer treatments. Kelly's approach rejected standard oncology and relied instead on strict dietary regimens, high-dose vitamins, minerals, frequent coffee enemas, and latrial. This was a substance derived from apricot pits that was banned in the United States due to lack of proven benefit and potential toxicity. McQueen committed himself fully to the program. He followed the regimen rigidly, believing discipline might succeed where medicine had failed him. To critics, the treatment offered false hope, but to McQueen, it represented control. It allowed him to act rather than wait. The medical community warned that these therapies had no scientific backing, but McQueen pressed forward. By the fall of 1980, his condition had deteriorated further. Tumors had spread through his abdomen. Despite the risks, McQueen agreed to undergo surgery in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, on November 7, 1980, in an attempt to remove several large tumors. Doctors warned him that the operation was extremely dangerous, especially given his weakened state and compromised lungs. Still, he consented. The surgery lasted several hours. 13 hours later, Steve McQueen died from cardiac arrest. He was 50 years old. The news spread quickly and stunned fans around the world. McQueen was still widely regarded as one of Hollywood's biggest stars, a figure who felt untouchable. His death did not follow the long public decline many associate with terminal illness. Instead, it arrived suddenly, cutting off the illusion that he might still recover. Tributes poured in from actors, directors, and racing communities alike. Those who worked with him remembered his intensity and professionalism. Racers spoke of his genuine skill behind the wheel and on the track. Audiences revisited his films, drawn back to the calm authority he projected on screen. McQueen was cremated, and a private memorial was held in Santa Paula, California. Attendance was limited to close family and friends. The final goodbye reflected how he lived, guarded, controlled, and largely removed from the spotlight. In the years following his death, McQueen's work continued to shape the action genre. Films like Bullet, The Great Escape, and The Magnificent Seven remained cultural reference points, studied and imitated by generations of filmmakers and actors. His influence only grew with time. His death also had consequences beyond cinema. Asbestos-related illnesses gained broader public attention, particularly among veterans and workers exposed without proper protection. McQueen's case became part of a larger conversation about occupational hazards in the military, manufacturing, and entertainment industries. And shortly after his death, rumors began to circulate about hidden truths, suppressed stories, and what his family would later reveal. Debunking the shocking rumors. After Steve McQueen's death, the silence he left behind did not last long. Almost immediately, disturbing rumors began to circulate. Some whispered among fans, others printed boldly in tabloids, and many repeated for decades without evidence. One of the most persistent claims was that Steve McQueen had faked his own death. The idea appealed to fans who believed he wanted to escape fame entirely, to disappear the way he often vanished from Hollywood between films. The truth, however, is firmly documented. McQueen died on November 7, 1980, following surgery in Mexico. His death certificate, medical records, cremation, and private memorial were all verified. There was no disappearance, and no second life lived in secrecy. Another theory suggested McQueen had been murdered or poisoned, often tied to his Hollywood feuds or his refusal to play by industry rules. Some claimed he had angered powerful figures, while others argued his outspoken nature made him a target. Again, medical documentation clearly shows that McQueen died from complications related to advanced mesothelioma, compounded by the extreme stress of surgery on a severely weakened body. No toxic substances, foul play, or inconsistencies ever emerged in official findings. A more modern rumor claimed that alternative treatments had cured him and that his recovery was somehow suppressed. This idea grew alongside criticism of the unconventional therapies he pursued in Mexico. In reality, those treatments were widely regarded as ineffective by the medical community, and none showed measurable success against mesothelioma. McQueen's cancer was terminal by the time it was diagnosed. His decision to seek alternative care reflected desperation and distrust of institutions, not a hidden cure. Another rumor lingered at the edge of plausibility because it was rooted in something McQueen himself believed. After the Charles Manson murders, McQueen became convinced that his name appeared on a potential hit list. This belief, combined with his death years later, fueled speculation that he had been targeted. However, no evidence ever connected Manson, his followers, or any related investigation to McQueen's illness or death. The fear was real to McQueen, but the threat was not. As rumors multiplied, his children became quiet witnesses to how myth overtook reality. Terry McQueen, his daughter from his first marriage, spoke openly in later years about who her father actually was. She described him as loving, but deeply troubled, a man who struggled to balance devotion to his children with the chaos of his lifestyle. Terry emphasized that despite his flaws, McQueen cared deeply for his family. even when his actions failed to show it consistently. Terry's own life followed a difficult path. She died in 1998 at the age of 38 due to complications following a liver transplant. Her death was widely seen as another tragic chapter in the McQueen family story, leaving her brother as the sole surviving child. With her passing, one of the few voices capable of grounding her father's legend in lived experience was gone. That role increasingly fell to Chad McQueen, who carried both the McQueen name and his father's passions forward. Chad built a career as an actor, appearing in The Karate Kid, while also becoming a professional race car driver and producer. Racing, more than acting, became the strongest bond between father and son. Chad often said Steve introduced him to motorsports early and taught him resilience through discipline rather than comfort. In interviews, Chad described his father as tough, demanding, and inspiring. He credited Steve McQueen with shaping his work ethic and his willingness to take risks, even as he acknowledged the emotional distance that marked much of their relationship. Chad spent years correcting exaggerated stories, emphasizing that while his father was flawed, he was not the caricature painted by rumor. Chad McQueen died on September 11, 2024, at the age of 63 in Palm Springs, California. He was survived by his wife, Jeannie, and their children, Chase and Madison, both of whom continue the McQueen legacy through acting and racing. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.